session.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms, and this is a show about culture, people, and how to create a winning lifestyle. I'm joined by my co-host, David Burkby, and today we are going to be talking about relationships, one-to-one, one-to-many, and who was the ultimate relationship builder. Before we start, let's get Dave's first word. What is it?
What's up?
That's 2 words. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. So I had this idea for this topic, and every night, Chandni and I watch either a show or a movie. Mm-hmm. Probably similar to most of you out there.
Same.
What show are you going on right now?
We watch a lot of Bravo.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Oh yeah. Just kind of different.
Well, right now we're on the Mandalorian, and we took a break to switch it up because there's a little bit too much action going on. So
What's the Mandalorian?
That's Star Wars.
Oh.
Off of Disney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you need to go on top of that.
Do you have Disney Plus?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is
it worth it?
It's pretty good.
Okay.
It's a pretty good service.
Okay.
Anyways, so we had to take a break from this because we had a lot of action, and Chandni loves crime. So I needed something that kind of cheered me up a little bit.
Okay.
And we ended up watching the Tom Hanks movie on Mr. Rogers.
Okay. How was it?
I know that I can already hear a lot of the judgments going on right now over the
so much judgment
over the podcast waves right now. But was very interesting. So I watched a documentary on Mr. Rogers, which came out the 2 years prior. I actually watched it on a flight going to Mexico. Very good. You should probably watch that too.
First off, we might have a lot of young listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Rogers was like an icon on PBS. He was an icon.
It was Channel 9.
Channel 9. That was when channels were
when we only had 6 channels.
Yeah. So basically I would filter from Mr. Rogers and then watch The Simpsons.
Yep. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yep. And so you don't realize it when you're watching him when you're little, that's just this nice little old guy that's coming in and he's greeting me and why am I in his house? And you start wondering all these questions.
They always called you hello neighbor, right?
Yeah, hello neighbor. And wait, how am I in your house right now? I'm like a complete stranger. But what was cool about his show was he really related well with kids. And I didn't realize what his whole goal was because as a kid I'm like, man, that's my friend. I like Mr. Rogers.
100%, same.
I don't think there's any millennial out there that would say I hate Mr. Rogers.
No.
Not one.
Not at all. I mean, I just remember him as, he always wore that same red sweatshirt. He's always super nice. He always had good stories to tell. And I remember watching him a ton when I was a kid.
I remember there was a rumor that he had a tattoo on his arm that was because he was supposedly he was in the Navy or something.
Really?
And yeah, something. I think he served. But I don't know. That's hearsay. So I don't know if that's true or not. But I just remember vividly remembering that in middle school. I'm like, no, he doesn't. Because tattoos back then were
right.
You can't have a tattoo. But anyways, what was very interesting about this documentary and this movie is that Mr. Rogers was the ultimate relationship builder. He prided himself on being the best at that. And he viewed relationships very different than everybody else. He viewed that little humans, children, were one-to-one with him as were adults. And he knew how to communicate between the two because those are 2 different types of species.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, children, the conversation is totally different. You can still have big concepts and big ideas with them, but you have to use basic language.
The approach.
Right?
The
approach is totally different. And he broke down a lot of barriers with that. And he was very good one-to-one. But what was even more impressive is he was able to insert himself as he is my friend at a mass scale. What was the first words that I said when we first introduced this topic? He was my friend. I sat in his house and he was my friend, which is crazy to me because that is one to many. What type of human being can do that? One to many. There's not many out there that can do that.
No, especially not today, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, you get some YouTubers that can do it.
But do you really feel like you're their friend or do you just really like them?
That's true. That's very true. If I saw Mr. Rogers, if he walked into this facility right now, I'd be like, what's up, Mr. Rogers? He has no idea who I am. Yeah. But what he does is he makes you feel like he knows you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of people who I follow, but now that you said that, I mean, I wouldn't consider any of those because I've never met them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you consider someone a friend? Like, you got to be super good at what you're doing to consider someone a friend that you've never met.
And you're probably everyone's wondering, like, where's this topic going? And here's my point: is that obviously Mr. Rogers is the GOAT at relationships. You have to be more interested in the other person. I think that's what he was really good at. Was he was so interested in who that person was, what they had to offer, what were their skills, what were their attributes, what were their talents. And I don't think a lot of people do that nowadays, is that they're more invested into themselves, which is, I mean, that is a good thing. You got to invest in yourself. You got to grow. You got to be be a better person. But how many times do you go to a party and you ask questions instead of saying a question and then reverting it back to you, and then so that you can tell your story?
I think that's so important. Obviously in what me and you do, Spike, we help run a business where we have a lot of employees that we work with. We coach, we teach, obviously interacting with other coaches, with players. The one-on-one relationship is, to me, it's so important. Okay, because if you really want the ability to get in depth on any topic, whether that's business related, baseball related, if you really want to help someone, that relationship has to be built first, because ultimately they're only going to listen to you to a certain extent until they truly trust you. And I found that out very young as a coach, very young in this operation, that if you really I want to find out as much as I can about you, how you tick, how you learn, how you communicate, how you talk, what's important to you, what's not important to you. I want to know everything, because then that can give me the answers I need to understand the approach I have to take with you, because everyone's different.
So when you're trying to teach somebody, because there's two different types of relationships when you coach. You're teaching somebody, and then you try to really get to know the parents and obviously your assistant coach. But let's go with the teaching first. Like, so when you're trying to teach, how do you start that relationship off?
Like, let's say I meet a kid for the first time. It's lessons, or I'm coaching him or whatnot. I probably won't even talk about baseball. I won't. I talk about everything outside of that. I try to find out his interests. Try to find out commonalities between the two of us. I really just want to hear how he communicates, how he talks, what he's open to, what he's not. So for the most part, those first couple interactions, I'm not just, tearing him apart saying, you need to fix this, you need to fix this. Here's what you don't do well, because I think if you do that, you're going to lose him. That guy's going to be like, oh, he doesn't like me already, and he doesn't even know me yet. But if I take the approach of learning that person, learning how I can talk to him, how I can teach him, how I can bring information to him, I think that's ultimately served me better, because then when I do bring him, hey, okay, John, now let's talk about this. Okay, let's talk about what you're doing here and why we're doing this and how this is going to get you better. Then I have him all ears, right? Then he knows I'm there with the right intent, with the right purpose. But if I do that without building the relationship, I think you'll get a lot of pushback.
And Mr. Rogers did it on TV, which is crazy to think about, because you can't build that relationship like how you're saying, which is one-to-one. But then when you're talking about group, how would you go one-to-many, like when you're talking about a team setting?
I don't think it's much different, honestly. It's just more, I guess it's more about how I talk. The one-to-one is me building significant relationships with that person. The one-to-many is still me building that relationship, but now I'm putting it in a team or group or, large number of people context. So I guess probably would flip my language to where instead of it's you, it's we, it's us, it's team. You hear the greatest coaches in the world. That's their lingo. It's never an I problem. It's never, it's an us. We did this together. So I'd change the context. But again, I think a lot of it goes back to if you want to have some successful teams, successful businesses, successful whatever, that person across from you has to understand that you're there to do anything you can for them at any time. Any way you can help, you're going to go to war for that person. And if they know that and they trust in that fact, there is no way the teaching that everything's just better.
So for coaching, which is really interesting, we had a coach previously in the organization, awesome guy, probably one of the best coaches I've been around when it comes to building one-to-one relationships. Very, very good.
Yeah.
The thing that he struggled with though was one-to-many, which is the team conversations. Everything he was saying was correct. Everything was absolutely on point. And one thing that he did was he would always talk really long.
Yeah.
Our post-game talks, I bet you there was one that was probably 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say a word.
Oh, I know.
So my point is that and me and him had that conversation all the time in the car. Is like, okay, was it too long? I'm like, yeah, that one was too long. But he got really good at it. And I said, I kept on thinking. I never mentioned this to him. I was like, keep it to 2 to 3 sentences, because I was referencing my dad with the lawyers and everything like that. But one person that was really good at one-to-many was John Wooden.
Hmm.
And how long do you think his speeches were?
I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever seen it. I know he's one of the most iconic coaches ever.
Stories say that he was probably a minute to 30 seconds.
Really?
And it was very, very quick bursts. It wasn't like I'm sitting here and talking like I am on a podcast for like 30 to 40 minutes. It was quick bursts like, hey, you're doing this, you're doing this. This is how we're going to do it as a group. All right, let's go execute. It wasn't like this philosophy of like, okay, this has to do this, and then we're going to go around here because the sky is blue, and we're going to go over here because this dirt over here is red, and then just going into this big explanation. It's like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Let's go execute.
So if you were a player and you were playing for a guy like that, from your perspective, how would you take that?
From a guy that was direct?
No, yeah, for sure.
Oh, if he was direct, I'd be like, this guy means business. I got to get going. Like, I'd be looking at my teammates like, did you hear what he just said? Yeah, I heard what he said. We need to get going.
From a relationship building standpoint, what do you think that did for him?
For which
player to coach?
Player to coach for like a
direct guy. Yeah.
It huge. Like, I feel like I felt like the communication line was a lot stronger. I always mention my junior college coach. He was a guy that was very short and quick burst. But then he would have on these. He would love telling stories. He was a big story guy, and when he went on a story, it was every once in a while, and you would listen to the story. But if he did like a couple stories in a week, or 3, 4, 5, that's when it kind of like we kind of tuned out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But when he was like, "You guys better do this," it was totally different.
So think about this, and I'm going to just switch gears a little bit on you, Spike. Think about the most successful people out there in sports, coaches, players, business leaders, CEOs, etc. What we're talking about today is one-on-one relationships, how to build relationships, the importance of relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how successful people do that. I heard a story, and it is March 26th. I heard a story because Tom Brady just signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Okay? Do you know what the first thing he did that he asked from the Buccaneers was? Do you know what he asked for?
No idea.
Every single player's phone number. Why do you think he asked for that?
Shoot him a text or give him a call. One of the two.
Because right away, his number one goal, this is my perspective on it, is he needs to start building relationships with those guys.
Johnny Manziel went to Las Vegas.
Little difference. Little difference. But that's how I think some of the best leaders, some of the best winners in the world do it. I think if you ask any of the guys who played for that dude in the Patriots, over those years of when they were bringing in ring after ring after ring, they would do anything for that guy. And how that translates to the field. That translates into life. I bet, he's got best friends, that relationships that will never, ever go away, right? From how he handled himself in the huddle, in the locker room, building those relationships prior. And I think if you look at any successful business, it's the same thing. Those employees underneath the CEO would do anything for that guy, right? Like, kind of look at some of the dudes like with a company in St. Louis that we follow a lot, First Form. Any of those employees would do anything for Andy Frisella. They would. You see it all the time in that culture. Same thing for other big companies out there. Same thing for the best teams. Those relationships, but it all started with one. It all starts with that one-on-one relationship and builds.
Just thinking about like what Andy or any other CEO, as you were talking, like how do they do it at mass scale if they don't have a platform? Obviously, Andy Frisella has a podcast, whereas guys can listen in. But like, how do like Apple? How does Tim Cook do it?
I'm sure that there's ways that they do it. They have to.
Yeah. Because
you don't win that well all the time consistently if you don't.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have people, I always look at it this way. Again, this goes into any aspect. If you have that guy if I know that you're going to go to war with me, if I know that you are in it for the right intentions, for me, to help us, to help everybody. You just see how it plays out. It always works. But if you have the person who maybe is half in, half out, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, the guys below you, okay, maybe it's employees underneath the top guy or, role players on a team, it doesn't work. They don't play hard. They don't do it.
They don't buy in.
No, they don't buy in.
Well, as you go farther down the line from the original source, you don't feel as belong as the person that actually started it, which I think is very intriguing by those big companies.
So how, if you're a player or a coach and you're in a situation where you don't feel like the team culture is great, or you're in business and same thing, your team culture is not great, what do you do? What is the first thing you do?
Well, obviously you got to look at your commitment. If you've signed a contract or you say to yourself, all right, I'm going to give this a year or 2 years, whatever your moral compass is on that decision, you have to fulfill that obligation without a doubt. If you don't, it's going to hurt you. Obviously, it's going to hurt some other people, but more importantly, it's going to hurt you longer term.
But I mean, step one.
Yeah, step one is you got to change yourself. That if I'm a worker in a negative situation, I've got to change myself. I got to look at, okay, what are my controllables? What can I control? And more than likely, it's going to be my attitude, or it's going to be my effort. It's going to be my hustle. We just literally did a whole podcast on this. And then my communication. And then what I would do is then I would try to inject myself and try to feed into positivity and just try to start with one person. And hopefully it spreads throughout that company or organization or team, whatever you put in the word that you want to put in there. But then if the situation, if I've given everything I have and I feel like I've done my best and I fulfilled my obligation, my commitment, then I would then reassess, okay, I probably need a better lifestyle.
Now, you said something in there that this is where my brain was going, okay, when I asked this question. You said you would start with one-on-one, right? Think about how this builds. This is how my mind works on it. If I had that situation where I didn't feel like culture was great, I didn't feel like, the team was successful or that we weren't going in the right direction, I would start talking to each and every individual, starting to build those relationships back, starting to really get deep into what they care about, what they're passionate about, finding commonalities, finding things. If I'm on a team, I'm going to every single guy. Maybe we're going out to eat one night, me and John. We're going out, me and Steve are going out the next night or whatever. And I'm going to build up the best relationships with those guys. Because if as a group, they know we're all together, now it's in turn from I, him, me, to we, to us, together. And then if I have that, then I can take off. It all starts with one-to-one.
And understand what Dave's saying here too is like on the practical side. It's like you don't have to buy all these people dinner.
No,
you don't have to
no.
buy these people dinner. But what you can do is you can have simple conversations, engaging with them, one-off conversations, but also just not talking to them, because when you just talk to them, you're talking to them. Listen, you might find something that could trigger a response to where like, okay, John loves the Denver Broncos.
Yep.
What could I do that would really help that relationship?
One of the coolest examples I have of this, and it happened when I was in college. Okay, so I played my first year at a junior college. Actually, I sat out my first year. I got injured. I had Tommy John. Then I played my second year, and then I went on to my 4 year. And I ended up playing 3 years at my 4 year because that was my eligibility left. And when I first got there, like any newcomer, you feel a little different. You feel a little lost. You don't feel a part of stuff because you don't really know it, right? One of the seniors that was there, we had a 3 year age difference. But one of the seniors that was there, within the first week that I was there, took me aside, just like after a practice, like we were just kind of cleaning up around the field, took me aside and just chatted with me, asked me a ton of questions about myself. Like, didn't talk baseball, didn't talk anything, just literally wanted to learn who I was. And at the end of that conversation, then he started to shift that towards the focus, the goals of the team, why I'm here, me personally, how excited he was that I was here. And I think he did that to just about everyone. Okay, every newcomer, whether that's a freshman or a transfer like myself. And I'll tell you what, that meant so much to me. And the feeling that I got after that conversation was like I'm at home. That I made the right decision. I'm in the right place. I can succeed. I can do this. And I think that was just a really cool feeling to me. And it made the world a difference.
And that's the difference between leaders and followers. And as a coach, you try to instill leadership and you try to teach people leadership. But at some point, you've got to sit back and say, you know what? I'm tired of being a follower. I got to lead. Mm-hmm. And you start reading books. And you start reading and listening in on what do great leaders do. You start watching what the Fortune 500 company CEOs do. Some of them are really good, and some of them are not very good, right? And you can obviously see the ones that succeed stay for a very long time. Obviously, Berkshire Hathaway, mm-hmm. Apple, mm-hmm. Amazon right now, those big companies. But one thing is that you're going to be a leader at some point, no matter what group you're going to be with. It could be a very small group. It could be a group of 3, a group of 2. But you need to know those skills, because if you don't, you're at a serious disadvantage. But
every great leader, it always goes back. And I'll just go ahead. This is my closing pitch. I'm going to jump into it. Every great leader, every guy who runs anything successful, it always starts that one-on-one. Do not be afraid if you're in a situation that maybe is not a great culture, maybe not the way you want it going. Never be afraid to take interest in someone else. Never be afraid to start that relationship, because it can ultimately lead to some of the best moments that you're going to have, the best friends you might meet, the best teams you might play on, the best businesses that you might be a part of. You can't be afraid of that one-on-one. And you can't be afraid to learn something about someone else and to grow. So that's mine.
Before I jump into my closing pitch, last thought I had was there's the 60-20-20 rule. And I was actually taught this by my dad. I don't know where he got it from, probably from a book. He reads a lot, or my mom, one of the two. But the 60-20-20 principle is pretty simple. So you have 60% of your team, whatever team you're on, whether that's business or baseball, whatever. Those people are always going to be in the middle. They're in the middle. And then you have the 20%, which is your leaders, your positivity, and then you have another 20%, which are your negatives, your cancers. And every team has them. It could be less than that, or it could be more than that. But you have to, as a leader, you have to identify who's what, and you have to try to get troops onto your side. Because if the bottom 20% takes that average, and they bring over, you're fighting over that 60%. If they bring over more than you, then that team is in a serious problem. You're going to have a very negative situation and a toxic situation. So it's the same thing with coaches. If you need to identify those guys that are leaders, and you have to try to promote the heck out of them and try to bring them up. If you don't have any leaders, you have to substitute yourself to be that leader and inject yourself into that team. So it's a war, basically. You have not a war, but a battle, and you're battling every day. You're trying to win it over because you want that bottom 20% to end up converting themselves into the 60%, and then you win them over, and you help out everybody. So that principle has served me really, really well and has helped me a lot. And if you can, take notes on that, because you'll see it when you go into different teams. You can identify, all right, these are the leaders. This is 60%.
Mm-hmm.
This is the bottom 20. I got to win over the 60, so then I can get the bottom 20 to be on my team.
That's an awesome example. It's
Yep.
totally right.
So my closing pitch: learn about leadership and learn how to build up that one-to-one and one-to-many. And Fred Rogers is the GOAT when it comes to building relationships.
Mr. Rogers, where it all started.
Thanks, guys, for joining in with us on this podcast. We use an app called Anchor, a really cool app. It helps us distribute this podcast to different platforms, but they have a really cool feature on there, which is messaging. So if you would like to submit your closing pitch, go to our Anchor page. You can download the Anchor app into your phone, and then you can go to our page, and then you can submit your own voice message by clicking that little message icon, and then we will hear your closing pitch.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for watching or listening, or both, to The Closing Pitch. If you would like to get your closing pitch featured on the show, we use a podcasting app called Anchor, where you can submit your statement or question via audio. Or what you can do is comment in the comment section of this post. We also accept direct messages. Please give us the A-OK if you do send us a DM to use your statement or question on the show. Last thing, please give us a review on your platform of choice, 5-star preferably, and we value your opinion, and this allows us to reach more people. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.